everyone and welcome to another video where we simply talk about the lore of League of Legends. Every now and then I make a video where we talk about facts you may not know about. Usually these facts range from anything from League's development to whatever mistakes Riot released over the years. But I never made a list of lore facts specifically. Yes, it is true that in some of the older videos I mention a lore fact or two. But today I really want to focus on lore. So why don't we talk about 5 things from the world of League of Legends that you didn't know about? Now, the veteran viewers of this channel will know that when I say you didn't know these facts, I make sure you really didn't know them. That's why we will not talk about the known facts. We all know that Katarina and Cassiopeia are sisters, and that Varus has a sister, and that sisters in general are quite disposable on Runeterra. So instead, we'll talk about the hidden facts. The point of this video is to show you at least one new thing. So if by any chance you already knew all 5 facts and you didn't learn anything new, let me know below so I can mourn in the corner of my room. So without further ado, let's get on it. Let's start with a fact that could be a great meme if it was well known in League's community. Did you know that the common people of Shurima have a special weapon against the Void? Ever since the fall of the Icathian kingdom and the opening of the Great Rift in Icathia, Void creatures started rapidly leaking into Runeterra. And with these horrifying creatures loose, the common people of Shurima developed superstitions. Most of them believe that when they sacrifice animals as gifts to the Void Lords, the Void creatures would spare their village and leave them be. For the most part, this superstition ended up being true, because people were sacrificing the Ekasul goats, which are massive animals, so their size easily sated the hunger of the Void creatures. So yes, the creatures did leave them be, but not because they would accept their goats as gifts to their gods, but it was more because these goats fed the creatures and they didn't need to hunt for more prey. Anyway, this isn't even the fact I wanted to tell you about. Because the common people of Shurima have another ace up their sleeves. Over the years, people realized that in order for the Void corruption to spread, it needs sustenance. Anything from animals to plants to bacteria in the water. The Void needs to consume life to spread further. So, in order to keep the Void at bay, people started spreading salt around the Void corrupted areas. By salting the deserts, they would make sure plants couldn't grow there. Therefore animals wouldn't go there, and the Void would be stuck on the other side. We even got this picture that shows us how the Void is trying to climb from the depths. But the moment it reaches the salty surface, its growth slows down, until it eventually falls into dormant state. The next fact I want to show you is about Ionia. Did you know that although mortals call the northern continent Ionia, every other ancient race, including the Yordles, the Vastaya and even the Celestials such as Soraka, call it the First Lands? Many believe that it's because this is where humans originally came from. But ever since Aizaokan was revealed, that theory was debunked. Because now we know that most of Runeterra's human civilization came from the jungles of Ishtar. The people of the Blessed Isles came from here, the Targonians too. And because the Targonians eventually spread to Shurima, we could say that the Shurimans are Ishtali too. The only other source of humans we know about could be in Freljord, since the story of the 3 sisters might be roughly as old as the beginnings of the ancient Ishtar. Anyway, the real reason why Ionia is actually called the First Lands by the ancient races is because this is where their origins truly began. From the canon story, we know that the Vastaya were born after humans started cross-reproducing with the Vastaya Shirei. The Vastaya Shirei were local magical animals that lived almost exclusively in Ionia and other remote islands. And they got in contact with humans after humans fled here from the other continents. So yes, bestiality is technically part of the canon lore. But here's where the really juicy fact comes in. The story told us that humans fled to Ionia because they were running away specifically from the Great Void War, which for the most part happened in the south. Now don't get me wrong, there were a couple of Void Rifts in Valorant too, but Shurima was a much worse battlefield. This means that people fled to Ionia from the south. So technically, not only are the Ishtali responsible for the Blessed Isles, Targonian Ascended, and even the Sun Disk, but from the information we have, it was the Ishtali who fled to Ionia and eventually spawned the first generation of the Vastaya. For fact number 3, we don't have to get too far away from Shurima. In fact, the main point of this fact is in Shurima. Because I want to show you an interesting place on Runeterra that isn't even mentioned in any of the stories. Right now you can only find it on the official map. Actually, we got a couple of places like this. In the mountains of South Shurima, there is a place called Zoantha Cascade. Just like you would have waterfalls in places where water is high above the sea level, here you have sand falls. It's a magical place where the Shuriman desert overflows down into an endless pit. Traditionally, Shurimans toss beloved objects into these sands as gifts to the Ascended. Because of this, you can find a lot of treasure hunters risking their lives here. Another cool place that is not mentioned in any story are the eastern coasts of Ionia. Ionia is cool because it's basically karma incarnate. And I'm not talking about this karma, I mean more of this karma. Basically, if you are nice to Mother Nature is nice to you. But because Mother Nature is really powerful in Ionia, you really want to behave. A really cool thing that happens on these coasts is that nature rewards local people with food and safe environment. You see, if the locals behave well, during late summer seasons, water would withdraw from the coasts, leaving behind plenty of fish for all the families to eat. But what's cooler is that Wright also explained what's happening in this picture. Here, nature is rewarding people with free meat. Basically, should the force of nature wish to do so, instead of letting people hunt crabs for meat themselves, nature can command crabs to just walk on the shores and wait to be captured by people. It's a pretty cool place, but there is one more thing I want to show you. My favorite of these hidden places is the Valley of the Song in southern Shurima. This is a remote pass filled with hollowed rock structures. When the wind blows through these rocks, they let out powerful disorienting whistling, hence why it's called the Valley of the Song. And of course there are also people who take advantage of the travelers who don't know about this place. There is a tribe of local raiders called the Shakal, who ambush the disoriented travelers. Of course, because they live here, the Shakal were completely deafened by the whistling, so they are immune to its sound. But because they can't rely on their senses while hunting anymore, they rely on their physical abilities. As a result, the Shakal craft unique tools from the bones of their prey. For example, these spring shoes give them, and I quote, terrifying speed. Also, did I mention that some of these people are cannibals? Well, they have to eat, and I don't think they can find a lot of animals here. The next fact on this list is about the Shadow Isles. If you are familiar with our channel, you probably know that the Shadow Isles used to be the Blessed Isles, and that there was a very advanced civilization before it got ruined. But did you know that the black mist on the Shadow Isles isn't just a random magical fog? It actually has its own story and reason too. After the people of Ishtal migrated to these isles, and they founded their own nation here, their isolation from the rest of the world gave them safety. So, when the Rune Wars started ruining the world, the Blessed Isles became a safe haven, similar to what happened to Demacia. Except the Blessed Isles were much harder to reach. Even so, the leaders of the Blessed Isles didn't want to be part of the world's problems. And so, they surrounded the Blessed Isles with a mist that would hide their location. And only if you knew the right incantation would the mist part and let you arrive at these islands. As far as we know, the only nations that knew about the location of the Blessed Isles were the Ishtali and the Icathians. But when the story of the Ruined King happened, and Callista screwed up everything she could, with Hecarim constantly breathing on her neck, the Ruined King cast a powerful suicidal spell at these islands, which turned them into the Shadow Isles. The black mist that spreads around and turns people into the undead is a dark form of the protective mist that was supposed to hide the nation from external danger. I see the irony in the fact that the mist that was supposed to isolate them is now creeping out into the world. And the last lore fact I want to talk about is about the Darkin. I know how much the lore community loves to talk about the Darkin, but a lot of you may not know that the Darkin originally had two canon versions of their story. Did you know that after the universe was launched and Riot was dedicated to only releasing canon lore, they wrote a story for the Darkin, but the lore didn't fit the narrative they were going for, and so they scrapped it later? This led into a mass confusion in the lore community, so let me clear it out. Years before we learned that the Darkin are just corrupted Shuriman Ascended touched by the Void, Riot had a different plan for them. This plan was revealed when they updated Varus' story, and they gave him a cinematic. Originally, and remember all of this was released on Universe at one point, Riot planned to make the Darkin a race that came from a different planet. The Darkin were just alien invaders who hungered for magic. The story went that after the Rune Wars engulfed Runeterra, the Darkin could sense the spike of magic across the galaxy, and so they decided to invade Runeterra in waves. The first wave of invasion had the most powerful warriors in it, like Aatrox and Rast. Varus specifically arrived on Runeterra in the second wave of the Darkin invasion. These invasions originally caused the Great Darkin War. And when in the comic Varus mentioned that the Darkin gave humans blood magic, originally he meant that blood magic was alien to Runeterra, and the Darkin brought it with them. Now, coming back to the canon version of the Darkin lore we have now, it's cool to see how much information Riot was able to keep the same for the new story. For example, Riot kept the comic exactly the same. They didn't change a word. Because what Varus says there still makes sense. It just has different meaning. Yes, the Darkin are not an alien race anymore, but they still created blood magic themselves, and they later passed it to mortals. Also, it is cool to see that Riot kept the entire weapon theme. In the old story, the Celestials sealed the invading race in their weapons to contain their power. This is pretty much the same now. In the new story, the Darkin were also sealed in their weapons. And it was also likely the doing of the Celestials. On top of that, in both versions of their story, the Ascended leader Setaka and her weapon played a major role in fighting back the Darkin. In the end, this now retconned lore stayed on the universe for about a year. And to this day, we don't know why Riot decided to scrap the idea of an alien race. I mean, I'm glad they did it, because we hardly knew anything about our own planet at the time. I only wish they had scrapped the story sooner, because they updated the Darkin a couple of weeks after I made a big theory about them. Unfortunately for me, that video got popular. And since some people didn't know that I made that video before the story changed, it made me look like an idiot for a very long time. Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other League facts and stories? And did you know that we have neat mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.